Hi, my name is Julia Misiego, and I grew up on a farm in rural Utah. And I was always passionate about agriculture because of that background, but I didn't really want to go into agriculture as a career. But I still wanted to contribute, help be involved in that space in some way using the talents I did have. So I decided to go to BYU Idaho and I majored in political science and I minored in communications. And the plan was to go to law school and to specialize in agriculture or water rights or something in that realm. But then every lawyer that I met in my undergrad time told me not to do it, not to become a lawyer. And to be fair, all of those people had been lawyers but were now working in a different sector, so it was probably biased advice, but it did influence me and their advice was sound. Like I understand their reasoning for telling me that. So then I got to my senior year and wasn't going to go to law school anymore and wasn't quite sure what to do. And then I got an offer to be an intern. Well, so back up a little bit. So what I started thinking about is like, well, maybe I could do like lobbying because I was aware my parents had always been involved in this organization called Utah Farm Bureau. Every state has a Farm Bureau Federation. It's a not-for-profit grassroots organization. There's even an American Farm Bureau organization on a national level. And they do a lot in the policy sector. And so I thought, well, maybe I could do that. Well, it just turned out that Utah Farm Bureau's lobbyist was looking for an intern during the legislative session in Utah. I applied, I got it. So I interned with him, and then the organization ended up hiring me full time to not work in the public policy side, but to do other things. I was a farmers market manager for Murray and South Jordan for many years. I also worked with like their women's organization. I did a lot of communication and marketing. I need to update my LinkedIn, but I have since actually gone part-time remote work. I'm still with the same company, but now I just do marketing. But I look back on that time and, well, and even still, my education from BYU Idaho has just been invaluable for everything that I've done in my life.
So would you describe yourself as a lobbyist, Julia?
I don't think I could say that. I would like to think that I have a certain amount of influence within my own little tiny local sphere. I do have a goal. So also caveat, the reason why I am now a remote worker is because I convinced my husband to move back to my hometown. So we're back in rural Utah.
Okay. Is this
Uh,
Duchesne?
yes.
Oh, nice. That's a lovely place.
Yeah. Well, have you been?
I was born in Roosevelt.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
How is it that I never knew that?
I
You're
don't know.
from Roosevelt?
Yeah,
I can't,
we're
can't believe that I
practically
never.
neighbors.
Yeah, that's crazy. How long did you live in Roosevelt?
Until I was 1 year old. But I have a lot of family and they actually all live in Altamont. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's
adjacent,
my mm-hmm.
just right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, it's a
Well,
lovely place.
yeah, I mean, that's a good take. I think it's a lovely place, but usually people who drive through it are like, "What the heck is this?"
Hmm. Well, if
You
you're
know,
not from there, you can't appreciate how beautiful it is.
exactly, exactly. I mean, I love the desert personally, but it's an acquired taste, I think. Mm. But yeah, no, I have the goal to at some point. What I love about rural communities, and I think Rexburg is still probably would be classified like a small community, but especially Duchesne, is that if you want to be involved, all you have to do is show up. And all you have to do is just care. And so I really like that. I like that I feel like I can make a difference and that I can have an influence. I do have the goal to one day run for public office when my kids are a little bit older. I would love to do that out here. But yeah, still involved politically and socially.
But so the Utah Farm Bureau, they are kind of a lobbying group, right?
They are, yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be so again, it's a grassroots organization, so people pay a membership to be a part of it. And then what they get out of it is so it's farmers and ranchers across the state who are like, "Hey, let's get together, pool our resources and our ideas." And then we have a lobbyist who then represents those ideas on Capitol Hill for us. And that's really one of I mean, they do other things too, like Farm Bureau hosts, educational things, personal development opportunities for their members, all sorts of other things. But the biggest selling point is they have a lobbyist who is representing the interests of farmers and ranchers in Utah.
I think that a lot of political science students, and then also just the general public, they think of lobbying as like this dirty word, right? And I think that what's beautiful about what you do is like it's not, right? Lobbying is just a group of people getting together, deciding that they want to make a difference. And so it's an organization that allows people with common interests to kind of work together. And they do more than just advocate for policy. Like you said, like your work entails so much more than advocating for policy. And so I think that there are a lot of students who are interested in, let's say, the policy space, or they're interested in political science, and they don't know all of the various ways out there that they can get involved. But you've made a career of getting involved, even though you're not in like the legislative branch or as a lawyer or as a poll worker or something like that.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think the key is passion. I think it's important. I was driven by something that I was already passionate about. And then also like staying close to the Lord, really. I can't discount that I feel like my life has really, he has gone ahead of me as a pillar of fire, just like with the Israelites, guiding me through a path that initially didn't seem clear, but looking back, I can really see his hand in all of it. And yeah, to your point, yeah, it is tricky because lobbying is just somebody trying to have influence, right? And you can try to have influence for something that you can agree with or something that you can disagree with. And yeah, even working in that space, I recognize that there are things that are tricky with that. But yeah, it doesn't inherently have to be a bad thing. Just like being a politician comes with all sorts of like people hear that word and they have all sorts of assumptions, but it just depends on the kind of person that you are and how you approach it. And there can be good and bad.
And you can look back on your career so far and say, there are things that are happening in farm politics in Utah that might not have happened if I wasn't involved.
I wouldn't be so bold as to say that me personally did that, but absolutely being part of an organization that absolutely did make a difference, 100%. And yeah, being in again, not to say like, "Oh, my voice was the one that did this," but just being in the room and being surrounded by those conversations and seeing like, "Okay, there's this bill that's gonna be bad. Let's let's organize, let's send our lobbyists to talk to legislators, let's get some farmers into their offices to meet with them and talk with them." And then that influenced how that politician voted. It is powerful to see that, yeah, it's not a lost cause.
Right.
I think in today's climate, it's very easy to get apathetic and discouraged. But especially on a local level, you really still can have an influence.
So let's step back to when you were at BYU Idaho. I imagine there were times when you told people, I'm majoring in political science, that they were like, what's wrong with you? Like, what are you doing? And how did you respond to that? How did you deal with that? What would you tell people about that today?
Well, yeah, and then even now, have when I tell people I majored in political science, the number one thing they say is, "Oh, did they teach you how to be a politician?" And I'd say, "No, I don't know if there's any class that can teach you how to do that." But what I took away from it, well, and also I have to say, I love academia. I love rigor. I love school. So like I just had an aptitude for it. So I really loved it. I had done like debate and student government in high school, so I was already primed to enjoy it. So yeah, I did really love it. But what I took the most from it is it taught me a lot about critical thinking. I learned a lot of critical thinking skills, challenged a lot of my biases. You get out of high school and there's that effect, which what is it called? Is it the Dunning-Kruger effect? The one where the less you know, the more you think you know. And then when you start to learn about it, your confidence and knowing that you don't know anything, it like drops. And then as you get to be more of an expert in it, that it climbs up a little bit. But where was I going with this? I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
What you got most from your degree?
Yes. So you come in with all your biases from high school of like, oh well, and where you grew up and including the country that you grow up in, and you start to think like, oh well, this political system is the only way to do things, or this economic system is the best way to do things. And then you get into classes, and my top two favorite classes, which I probably think about every day, are modern political theory and ancient political theory. Both those classes just like changed my life because I was introduced to so many different philosophies about human nature and about government and economic systems. And there's not inherently like one correct way to do things. It just depends on the assumptions that you're working with, the people that you're working with, and how you want things to be set up and what's going to work. And yeah, you can see the good and the bad of all those different things. So just to examine those, yeah, it was really impactful.
So I would imagine, like, coming from a small place in Duchesne, you probably at some point wondered, like, "Am I ever gonna make it? And, will I" tell me how that worked out, like, because obviously you made it. So, how did you deal with that, negotiate that along the way?
Yeah, that's funny. For some reason, Heavenly Father blessed me with an undue amount of self-confidence, and so I actually never did feel like I wasn't gonna go anywhere. I actually from I don't know, from my childhood, I just had this drive of like, I am gonna do things and I'm gonna make a difference, and I'm gonna get out of this podunk town and I am gonna go places. Ironic now, 10 years down the road, I've moved back because I was never coming back. I had hit the road. But, yeah, I can understand, that probably does come in for a lot of people, and for me too. There are still times when I doubt myself and think well, not and I wouldn't say doubt myself, but just doubt, like, "Is this even worth it? Like, is anything I'm doing making a difference?" When staying informed and staying involved can be exhausting, especially when you do everything that you can, everything as a citizen that you can do civilly without actually being in public office, but you're doing everything that you can and then nothing is moving the needle. People are still voting not the way that you would like them to vote, or things are still happening that you don't disagree with. So it can be very discouraging. But yeah, I would just go back to the advice of stay close to the Lord and that it's not bad to challenge yourself. It's not bad. I mean, I think human nature is to run away from friction. We don't like things to be hard. We like things to be easy. But it's in that friction where you find the growth and it's in that discomfort. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it's great. Let me ask you this. A lot of women who study political science and probably other things at BYU Idaho feel this kind of pressure, or maybe there's this unwritten rule that a woman should choose to be a stay at home mom and not pursue career ambitions. And you've clearly done both. And so I wonder what advice you have to women who deal with that pressure at BYU Idaho or maybe even other places, and like, how do you deal with that? And how do you negotiate that? And how have you like dealt with that in your own life?
My goodness, I love this question. I could probably spend hours. I mean, this could be like you could have like a whole class on all the different nuances and facets of that question. So I will go back and say that one of the reasonings why I did not become a lawyer was because I knew based on the people that I had met that so you go to law school, you get in a ton of debt, and then you have to work to pay off that debt. And I knew that I did want to have children. And once I had children, I wanted to have that freedom to decide if I wanted to work or not. And I knew if I had that huge debt load, I wasn't going to be able to have that choice. So that was a big factor in me deciding not to go to law school. And not that that's off the table entirely. I still play around with the idea like, hey, maybe when my kids are grown, I could go to law school.
Yeah.
So it's never entirely off. But yeah, it is very challenging, and I don't know if I have great advice. I could just talk about all of the different nuances. One thing I would say, one piece of advice. Number 1 is, again, just go forward with faith and ask God to go before you as a pillar of fire, and you will figure it out because I think well, and I came from a very matriarchal family. I came from a family that, women were very independent and very I have my mom has 8 siblings and 4 of those are women are aunts, are my aunts. My grandmothers were both so my grandparents, both of them are farmers and ranchers on both sides, and both of my grandmas were heavily involved in, like, the finances and the decisions. So I always had examples and then my mom as well, I just had that really strong example of just be like, the women really, led out in the home and, still I don't know what I'm trying to say, but just, like, I think sometimes we get this idea that if you're a homemaker, if you're a mother, then you don't have all of these other skills, but you still do, and the number one thing I would say, though, my advice would be, yeah, go for it in faith. If you wanna have a career, then go for it. Absolutely go for it. And things will work out. You know, when you start having children, then you will be able to figure it out. And there are a lot smarter women than me who have written many, many books on on that side of it. But I would say marry a good man. Marry a man that you are on the same page and that will be in it with you, in the trenches with you. And there's a great book called Fair Play, by, oh, I don't wanna misquote her name, Eve, I wanna say Eve. I'll need to look it up. Maybe you'll need to cut this part out, but Fair Play, and she goes through that. She's like, "You need to think about all of the tasks that it takes to run a household and have children, and then you divide them equally. If you are working equally, you know?
Mhm.
And it's gonna look different for every couple, but I would say it's not just a conversation of, "Should I have a career or should I have kids?" It's a bigger conversation. It's, "Who am I," "Is your husband on board? Is he gonna be supportive of that? How is that gonna work between you 2?" Like, communication with you and your husband is huge for success. Because I say this a lot that, when you get married, you don't wanna think about the dishes, but so much of marital conflict is the dishes, right? I mean, and
It
that
is.
sounds trivial, but and the
It is.
dishes present a bunch of
Yeah.
other things, but it's
Yeah.
all about the dishes. So, I would say to consider that.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm, so many more things I could say, but it's gonna go too long.
Well, let me ask you, going back to your time at BYU Idaho, are there things you wish you would have done or things you wish you would not have done?
It's a good question. 'Cause I wish I would have done. I don't have a lot of regrets.
I know, I can tell you're like that.
I have no regrets. I can tell you the things that I'm really glad that I did,
Yeah,
which I would give advice to anybody, is
yeah.
to get involved with all the things that are offered within your major and your minor. So, like, the student organizations and the, Pi Sigma Alpha, to really get involved and also to have a really good relationship with your professors, because I think that was key. They have connections, they have advice, and it's like you're there, you're paying to be there. Hopefully, you want to be there. So, why not take advantage of all of the different opportunities? I think it's unless I know lots of people choose also to have children while they're in school, but if you don't have children, it's like that's the only time in your life where you can focus 100% on just yourself and learning and doing and getting new talents and skills. And so I would say, yeah, take advantage of all the opportunities. And I will give an anecdote. I don't know if you remember this, but when I was a senior and I decided not to go to law school and I was trying to figure out what to do. It was my last semester. I actually had another offer to work. I worked at the financial aid office at BYU Idaho as a student all my time there, and then I got a full-time offer at Boise State in their financial aid office, like salaried, or I could go take this lobbyist intern position. And I was in, Professor Carter's office, and then you were there too, because it was when his office was just right off that main hallway, and so if his door was open, like, students could just pop in. And I remember telling you both, like, "Okay, here's my 2 options. They both lead very different places. What should I do?" And I laid out the pros and cons, and in true professor fashion, neither of you gave me actual advice. Well, neither of you tried to sway me one way or the other. You gave me advice, but you didn't try to, like, tell me, "Oh, I think you should do this. I think you should do that." You just said, yeah, you're like, "Think about where you want this path to take you and what you really want, and then, of course, pray about it." But yeah, that was a pivotal moment, and it wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have had that relationship to be able to just, like, pop into, Professor Carter's office and say, like, "Hey, what should I do about this?" So I think that, advice is invaluable.
Yeah, that's great. Any other advice you would give students at BYU?
Yeah, I would just say have a good attitude. about it. Be hopeful. I know it's really hard right now, I think, to be hopeful. And we know, in the scriptures it says that men's hearts shall fail them. I think we're really living through a time like that, especially with young people. Yeah, but keep the hope, keep the faith, stay close to the Lord, and listen to your professors and your parents and all of the boring things that teenagers don't want to hear. And yeah, and don't be afraid of hard work. Don't be afraid of that friction. That's where you learn, that's where you grow. Yeah, and just go forward with faith.
That's awesome, Julia. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
You did